Columbus, Georgia, this is your City Council. Mayor Teresa Tomlinson. City Manager Isaiah Hughley. Pop Barnes, District 1. Glenn Davis, District 2. Bruce Huff, District 3. Evelyn Turner Pugh, Mayor Pro Tem and District 4. Mike Baker, District 5. Gary Allen, District 6. Mimi Woodson, District 7. Tom Buck, District 8. Judy Thomas, Post 9 at-large counselor. Skip Henderson, Post 10 at-large counselor. Tiny Washington, Clerk of Council. And City Attorney Clifton Fay. Columbus, Georgia, this is your City Council.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the October 13th meeting of the Columbus City Council. It's so good to have you with us here today on this rainy fall day. We do have a good bit of business, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to call forward Neil Richardson with the Muskogee County Sheriff's Office Jail Ministry to bring us an invocation consistent with his faith tradition. Good morning.
Good morning. Shall we pray? Father God, I just ask blessings on these that have accepted your call of leadership, on them and their families. I pray for your wisdom and will this day. I pray for unity, and I pray for commitment to community. Most of all, God, I just pray your love for each. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. All right. We have our pledgers could not make it this morning. I think the weather might have slowed them down a bit, but I think we can muddle through. If you all will stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Well, we have a special proclamation today. We had our proclamation session last week, and some very important people were not able to make it, but we didn't want to miss out because today is this week is National School Lunch Week. And so we want to call forward our Muskogee County School District Nutrition Team. If they come forward to the podium here. You want to come over here while I present the proclamation? Oh, no. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah. The proclamation reads, whereas the National School Lunch Program has served our nation admirably for over 50 years through advanced practices and nutritional education, and whereas the state of Georgia has provided national leadership in securing and maintaining nutritionally sound, financially feasible school nutrition programs which provide adequate meals for all children, and whereas the school nutrition program in Muskogee County has been recognized as a leader in innovative programs designed to provide nutrition and nutritional education to our students and community, and whereas the school nutrition program in Muskogee County not only contributes to the health and education of our children, but it also makes a significant contribution to our local economy through the employment of over 430 school nutrition employees with a payroll of over $7 million and local purchases of more than $7 million worth of food, including approximately 6 million half pints of milk. And whereas the success of the school nutrition program in Muskogee County can be attributed to the cooperative efforts of the school board members, administrators, nutritional program personnel, parents, students, teachers, and community leaders, all of whom deserve our support and recognition. Now, therefore, I, Teresa Pike Tomlinson, Mayor of Columbus, Georgia, do hereby proclaim the week of October 12th through 16th, 2015 as School Lunch Week. Let's give them a round of applause for what they do. And we'd like to hear a bit from you, please.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm Chantel Stroger, the school nutritionist, where I plan the menus and make sure we stay in regulation with the food. We feed over 25,000 students for lunch each day, and around 8,000 to 9,000 students each morning for breakfast. And this is just a portion of our nutrition managers right here. We have 52 schools that we serve, and this is just a small portion. They work really hard. We're excited about National School Lunch Week. The theme this week, excuse me, is Snapshot. We're trying to promote our program to let everybody know that it's a lot going on, and we're making sure the kids are having something to eat, nutritious food daily, you know, from each component. And we're just excited to be here and excited about this week. And this is our Muskogee County School Nutrition Association president, and she would like a few words.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to thank y'all all for letting us come in this morning and be a part of y'all. And we have a small token of love for each and every one of y'all from the MSNA, which is the Muskogee County School Nutrition Association. Oh, y'all all know what it is.
It's goodies, I bet. Do you all want to introduce yourselves real quick before?
Good morning.
And what school you're with? Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Janta Marshall. I am the nutrition manager at the Columbus High School, home of the Blue Devils. Go Blue Devils.
That's right. All right.
Good morning. My name is Estella Loki. I'm the nutrition manager at Eagle Ridge Cafeteria.
Good morning. My name is Clara Singletary. I'm the manager of Baker Miller School.
Good morning, everyone. I'm the nutrition manager at St. Mary's Magnet Academy.
Good morning. I'm Jacqueline Walker, and I'm from Downtown Elementary. And I also wanted to advise you all that we do have a Facebook page, a MSNA Facebook page, and a Twitter page that you can like to see some of our pictures of our meals and the different activities that we're doing this week. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for what you do. We want you to come around so we can present you with a proclamation, also shake your hand. Let's give them a round of applause, folks. Next, we have another special presentation. I want to call forward the Chief of the Columbus Police Department, Chief Rick Boren. He has a guest here with him today, Kai McQueen, and they have an exciting announcement to make. Chief, good morning.
Everybody. Thanks for the invitation this morning, Mayor, Council, City Manager, City Attorney. As you know, back in October of 2014, we started a new advertising program with the Columbus Police Department based for applicants with the department. Since that time, and we called it Join the Force for Good. Since that time, we have seen our applicants increase some 20%, with another 41% of hiring increase based on, we feel like, a marketing video that we put out. The video was made and produced by Kai McQueen with Image by Design. You've met him before, and without further ado, I'll show you that 3-minute video clip, and then I'll tell you where it's taken us.
Negative K, that's negative K, that's further, further. Just City Camping in the corner.
It's a very exciting video. We have had it out on all of the local media stations, all of the local stations. We've had it on the Ledger website. We've also had it posted on other social media sources, and we've seen it observed some 1,400 times on YouTube alone. Clyde McQueen is with Image by Design. He's also a marketing design expert, and he gave us his time in order to put this together. Of course, everything that you saw there are officers with the department as well as equipment that's owned by the City of Columbus. We are very excited today to say that this video has won an award, and the award was something I'll let Clyde explain to you, and we'll show you the award. He's more in depth as to how this came about than I would be. But without further ado, Clyde McQueen.
Well, howdy, folks. It's been about a year. I was here a year ago when we debuted the video and reported to you the endeavor to reach out and push out information regarding the Columbus Police Department and their recruiting endeavors. And we just wanted to come back this year and kind of report to you a year later where we are. In the course of the process, in my line of work, there are times when you produce work that you feel is worthy and you might enter it in a competition. And that's what we did with this video. We entered it into a national competition called the Telly Awards. A Telly is an award given, the award process was created actually for production companies and agencies and creatives who work on a local and regional level. The only criteria is that you can't be a national agency with big budgets to enter this competition. The Telly is created and developed by the same company that does the Oscar and the Emmy. And so it gives those of us on a local and regional level an opportunity to get some recognition. So you submit the work, and then it's judged by a panel of creative experts put together from a national level. And I'm pleased to report to you that the video received a Telly Award this year, and I want to present this, show you what it's like. This is it, and we will present this to the chief, and he can display this. It also works as a good nutcracker also. But I do want to say that in our line of work, of course, it's always gratifying to receive a recognition, but more importantly, we strive to achieve results. And matter of fact, the slogan for our company, and this sounds like a sales pitch, but it's not, but it's where creativity meets results. And this video, I think, personifies that. When you receive an award, it's always a positive thing, but more importantly, we want to gain customers and results. And in the case of this video, we want people to respond, apply, and then, of course, through the process, add to numbers of our police department, as you know, is an ongoing need. And I guess you want to speak to where we're going now, forward? Or I'll tell you what, I can allude to this. At this point, we are obviously refreshing the campaign. You noticed at the onset there were billboards up over time. The arrangement that we had with CBS Outdoor, which is now Outfront Media, was for about a year. And they remained a little longer than that and then sort of kind of disappeared. So we've reinvigorated that campaign, freshened up the billboards. Some we use the same photography. Others we've added clips from the video as well as taken photography. And so you'll see these billboards up. They are, we actually have, if I'm not mistaken, 6 billboards. And right now they're in prime locations. These billboards and locations are donated by Outfront Media, which is a tremendous support. This allows us to blanket the community with a message in a mass media sort of way. The only thing they asked was to pay for the printing of the billboards, which we did. The value, I'll tell you conservatively, for this buy monthly is about $9,000 a month. And so as an agency that places billboard advertising, that's a conservative estimate based on the locations of those billboards and the longevity of the campaign. But I do want to express my appreciation to Outfront Media as a partner and an asset in this endeavor. And moving forward, there are additional things that we're doing to ramp up this effort.
We'll hold on to that before he leaves with it. But we are. We're refreshing not only that, but our campaign as far as recruiting, as far as paperless recruiting or applications through the department. That you'll see online in the first quarter of 16, if not before. And I want to say again, for the billboard company, they have given us this space. And that's a lot of money, a lot of savings, and a lot of benefit to the City of Columbus as well as the police department. Clyde has given us his time and his equipment short of having to hire photography, which we handle that. Everybody has come together. Everybody has got together with us. We formed a bond in trying to hire and get the best officers in Columbus that we have, and I think that this is a perfect example of that. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Chief, and Kai, thank you so much. Congratulations on that honor. It took a great partnership pulling together and coordinating to bring that to fruition, and it's an excellent representation of our law enforcement agency here. And so thanks, Chief, so much. And look forward to seeing it refreshed and renewed and out there on the Internet as well as the billboards. So thank you all so much. Yeah. With that, we're going to head into the City Attorney's agenda. Mr. Fay.
Thank you, Mayor. First item up is a second reading we need a vote on. This would amend Section 26 to do with cost of living adjustments in the budget ordinance for FY16. It's ready for adoption.
Move approval.
We had a motion and adoption, a motion and a second for adoption. Any discussion regarding this issue? Seeing that there's none, please record your votes electronically. All right, and it does pass.
All right. Now that that's passed, Ms. Hollowell has one question, whether y'all want to administratively go back for the past year or 2 years on the COLA for the active employees.
That's correct.
That can be done administratively if council wants to go on and let her perform that function.
Yes. So that's the question.
Say it one more time, Retha. What is it that you're asking?
The question is, because council has approved for the drop participants to receive the 0.5% COLA, they have not received it in FY15 and FY14. So I'm asking if it is council's directive then therefore to go back to FY14 and FY15 and pay those drop participants that 0.5%. We talked about that being a total of about $14,000, $15,000.
All right, let's see here. We have Councilor Henderson.
Yes, ma'am. Just a quick question, just making sure the source of those funds would be those various departments that those individuals who elected the drop plan are in right now?
It is my understanding from the finance director that those funds would come from the general fund. And would they come from each department's budget?
And that can be a directive from council if you want each department to make up that difference for those participants.
Well, had they received those at the time that they were, the council was just now determined they were earned, they would have come from their department. Is that not correct?
We budget for the cost of living adjustments, so they would have been included in that and part of the budget for the fiscal year, but they were not.
I understand that, but they would have been offset at each department's individual budget. Then yes, I think that's the only way to do it.
But we would have added funds to their budget to cover those COLAs. And now this way we will not be doing that. It'll just be coming from their operational funds. Okay, let's see. Councilor Thomas.
Ms. Hodge, I agree with Councilor Henderson that I think this should come from those department budgets. And it's would seem to me, in some of the other conversations we have had about salaries and so forth, that each one of those departments probably had some salary savings in those years. Is that a true statement?
They probably would have in those fiscal years, but all of those excess funds roll to fund balance at the end of the fiscal year. So any adjustments now would take place out of their FY16 budget, not from prior year budgets. So either it would come from fund balance or it would have to be adjusted within the department's FY16 budget to make up for those COLA adjustments for 14 and 15.
And Ms. Hollowell said you thought it was like 14,000. Isn't that the figure that you gave us for the total?
Yes.
To do all three fiscal years, is that right?
That was 2 fiscal years.
Two
that
fiscal
didn't include FY16.
It did not include 16.
So what's the total? What's the total to do this if you do it for all 3 years, 14, 15, 16?
I think it was 8. So 22,000 is the total for all 3 fiscal years.
For all 3 fiscal years. And if this council were to say to you, this should come from the department budgets in their salary line item, is that achievable?
It's achievable, and if there's an issue in one particular department, it might be a very small department that doesn't have any vacancies, we can bring those specifics back to council for approval.
Okay. Then, Mayor, is it appropriate for a motion at this time?
Yes.
Yes. If you want to make a motion, we have another counselor who'd like to for discussion, but that's fine.
Well, I would make a motion that this item be charged to the individual departments as we have discussed.
For FY 14 and 15.
Yes, 14 and 15.
How about for FY 16, Pam? Is it for FY 16 as well?
That would be the same, yes.
Okay, and that's the second.
Whatever it takes to do it, that's what, and that it be charged to.
All right. We have Mayor Pro Tem.
Why are we doing 14? I thought it started in 15, July.
No, it started in 14. Actually, the drop started July 1 of 2012, which was FY 13, was when the drop actually started.
And it goes for 3 years, and that's it?
Each employee can be in the drop plan for 3 years. But the drop plan is continual. It's part of our pension plan now. So new participants can enter, and then they're in the 3-year time frame.
Okay, Mr. City Attorney, if we continue to add people to the drop plan, that means they're going to get double COLAs each time, even the new people too?
They'll get COLAs on the active portion going forward, the active employee portion going forward.
I thought council was going to have to determine that on a budget-by-budget basis.
That's correct.
Yeah. I don't think that this ordinance just passed is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think council needs to know. I do not believe that the ordinance just passed affected future years.
Yeah, this is for FY16 only, what you just adopted.
Mm-hmm. So council can make the policy decision whether it wants double COLAs for drop participants going forward.
You can make this decision annually at budget time.
Okay, so what we're voting on is just the double COLA. It's just for FY16.
That's what was just approved. And now they're asking administratively if they can go back and do the double COLA for folks in FY14 and FY15.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right. There's a motion. There's been a second, and there's no further discussion. So we will, I don't believe this is on, can be queued to vote. So all those in favor, please state aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, one opposed. Tiny, did you want to call? Okay. All right.
All right. That's approved for administrative action. Thank you. Next ordinance ready for a vote is 13-167.3, the timing, placement of garbage disposals and keep any rubbish, limbs, yard waste away from structures such as power lines. It's ready for adoption.
Move approval.
We have a motion. Is there a second? A second. Any discussion on this item? Seeing that there's no discussion, please indicate your votes electronically. And it passes.
All right. Thank you. Next item we're going to call up should be shown as your item 3. This will be amending Chapter 2 of the Columbus Code so as to designate the council as a common redevelopment agency pursuant to state law and redevelopment powers, would also delegate the administrative functions to the Development Authority. It's ready for any discussion. You recall about a year ago the voters approved a referendum to allow this tool to be used in Columbus, and this is another piece of enabling legislation. Mr. Jones is here. I think there may be some other guests.
Any questions related to the ordinance? I know we have, Rick is going to present the first read of text amendments regarding the tax allocation districts. Rick, do you want to go ahead and do that now? And
yes, ma'am.
It may elicit questions.
Good morning. As the city attorney has already informed you again, this is the process where the voters took place last year in adopting and allowing us to go forward with these tax allocation districts. In doing so now, those are really set in place and ready to be utilized throughout the community. What has to happen now, though, is we have to establish really some kind of idea about how we're going to utilize these tax allocation districts, or TADs, throughout the community. And what we've come back and done is looking at trying to come in with a set of policy and guidelines that will provide that direction, so that we do get an application or someone comes before council and asks about how do we go about, or how can I establish a TAD in a certain area, we will have those guidelines established and go forward from that. Before I go any further, also, I have Mr. Ken Bleakley here, who has also been here at several times and give you some information as well about TADs. He is really my backup this morning for the most part, because that's his level of expertise. And we have been working with Mr. Bleakley also as well, not only in designing these guidelines, but in helping potentially establishing some TADs throughout the community. You should know that now, that there is an interest in developing TADs. At least right now, in the discussion stages, we've had discussions about 4 potential sites already happening. That's why it's imperative we go ahead and put these guidelines together from this standpoint. The creation of a TAD itself, it's got to be in areas in which the city really suffers these things. I'm not going to read all this to you, but things like disinvestment, lower property crimes, high crime, so forth. The areas that have property values that are lower than the city averages themselves from that standpoint, lowest of new investment, that have sites that are doable or for redevelopment itself as a whole. And then there are also areas in which lack the necessary infrastructure that support things as far as development goes from that standpoint in dealing with the area as a whole. And as a little side note here, as a reminder, we can only create as many TADs we want to, as long as it's not more than 10% of the tax digest itself for the city. There are really 2 forms of tax allocation district we're shooting for here. Really, it's an area-wide tax allocation district where you come in and identify a large area for the TAD itself. And then there are those project-specific areas themselves that may be contained in that larger area as well, in terms of establishing the TAD from that. Usually, the large one, of course, has multiple parcels associated with it. The smaller one has sites of 1 or more parcels from that standpoint. But again, there are 2 different areas we can look at in dealing with the TAD itself. The maximum life of the TAD itself is at 32 years in terms of what we deal with from that. There are some financing opportunities here as well in establishing the TADs, such as establishing the tax-exempt bond financing, taxable bond financing itself, a loan from a lending institution, the pay-as-you-go aspect of it, or any other financial structures involved with that. Because when looking for that amount in terms of between what's actually the baseline and what's being projected. That's how we have to figure out what kind of financial needs we may have. These are the eligible expenses for under a TAD. It's allowed by state law and by what we're associating it with WIL. Capital cost here, land clearing, real property acquisition, transportation improvements, public facilities. There is pretty much a wide smorgasbord, if you want to call it that this morning, of opportunities here that we can have within TAD itself. There are eligible expenses involved with the TAD itself. Again, things like paying off the interest, reasonable debt services, expenses, principal and interest paid. These are all eligible costs, financial costs we can look at doing. These financial expenditures will be limited to 25 years in terms of making those payments back, limited basically to about 15% of the actual project itself. We're not financing the entire project. We are providing that incentive, though, for redevelopment to occur in a certain area. The financing for a project may be authorized if it can be shown that other financial opportunities are not available, and that's really important here as well. This is the criteria we're going to look at for consideration under these guidelines, and things like creating new jobs, bolstering the employment and economic base, decrease blight and poverty, reduce crime, and then implement the comprehensive transportation plans and economic development strategies for a particular area. And this last one is probably the most important on here, is because the application must demonstrate a but-for clause in here. You have to show us really that you cannot develop that project without the exception of having to deal with the TAD itself. That's vital to us from that. There are two types of applications here we're going to look at. One is private sector, and of course one is public sector as well, where the city and other entities, governmental entities, can actually participate in TAD as well. There's some other considerations. Redevelopment of brownfields are going to be given top priority, or high priority anyway. Projects that have major infrastructure improvements that are going to go on, mixed-use developments, sustainable developments. But the other thing is also we're not going to make this retroactive. We're not asking that we make it retroactive in terms of projects that have already gotten started, and they have to come back to us on that. The application itself here, when a developer or someone applies for the consideration of use of a TAD, it's got to have a complete description of the project. It's got to have an independent financial study. That's important. How are you going to be able to make this project work, and how are you going to pay back what needs to be done? It's got to show how it meets the city's comprehensive plan. It's got to have a past 10-year trend analysis, and it's also got to have 20-year projections that show the value of the project parcels should it not occur, or if the project should occur, or if it only partially occurs overall. And that's what we're looking for from that. The application also must have the project plans, of course. It's got to have identification and redevelopment of existing businesses in the area from that. Documentation on how the final project value will be reached. Market analysis, feasibility studies. These are all key elements as well. Financial ability. Contribute equity of at least 15% to the project itself. Minimum, and we have an application fee we're proposing here of at least 2% or $2,000 involved with that. If it's a larger project, the guidelines provide for the city manager to go up to $20,000 for that fee. And the reason being is because of what studies we may have to actually participate in as well as ourselves in determining whether this project is really feasible. It may require additional work on our part to do just that. There's some accountability that also has to be built into this in long range from that, in terms of providing job creation and growth reports to us on an annual basis to let us know what's going on with that project. Relocation, justification of existing businesses. If those kind of things have to go on, we need to know why. And then getting this annual progress report to overall of how you're coming about with the project. There are, of course, the method of financing here. We would provide for direct reimbursement. We would provide direct reimbursement once the tax funds come in, and they provide us the necessary documentation to provide that. Or we could do it under a tax allocation bond or note financing from that standpoint. The review of the application, the important part here, is the Director of Planning would actually chair that committee and looking at the advisory committee in terms of making that determination about whether the application should go forward. That would be made up of 3 members from the consolidated government, myself, the Community Reinvestment Manager, and the Finance Director. We would also provide for 2 voting members from the Muskogee County School District, because they may have a key part in this in terms of what they deal from their taxing side on that. Other representatives also may be included, but not necessarily a voting member, would be represented from the city attorney, the tax assessor, engineering department, special tax district representative, whoever that may be. The Columbus Waterworks may be a player in this, and then, of course, financial advisors and any bond counsels. This is not intended to be an all-inclusive listing, but it can give you an idea about who should really be sitting at the table and looking at these applications with us. The review of the application itself, 60 days would be the maximum to either accept, to reject, or reapply to the application. If approved, the staff will work with the applicant to draft necessary financial and terms for a development agreement itself involved with that. Agreement terms then would be presented to the council for your consideration with a recommendation from the advisory council itself. This board, and this ordinance is being proposed this morning, would make that final determination in terms of the TAD itself. Would require a public hearing in front of council when it's all said and done, and you have to adopt the establishment of that TAD by ordinance from that. And again, the council has the option to accept, reject, or to modify or re-enter really the negotiations from that standpoint. The TAD, from that standpoint, also would start by the December 31st of the year approved from that standpoint. So there is still a time window of opportunity here between now and the end of this year for the TAD to actually go into effect, a TAD go into effect next year from that. And with that, I will stop and try to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Rick? And Rick, you are having inquiries about potential TAD districts, I take it?
Yes, ma'am. We are.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, and appreciate those who've come down. If there's nothing further, I guess we'll move on. Thank you all very much.
If there are no further questions, we'll vote on that item in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
The next item up for first reading, Mayor, is the legislative agenda. We got a request to move it up to this point on our agenda.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to the city manager. It's typical on the city manager's agenda. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We presented the legislative agenda to you at the September work session. There were 7 items on the legislative agenda, and so those 7 items will not be new to you or new to those here or listening by television. They've also been printed in the newspaper. But since that September work session, we have added there's been a request to add 2 items, one from Councilor Henderson and Judge Solinsky, and the other from Councilor Pop Barnes, and so we will present those to you this morning. And so first on the legislative agenda is an item that came from Councilor Henderson. It's been on the legislative agenda for a number of years. Has to do with the other local option sales tax hotel motel exemption. We are again requesting our local legislative delegation to introduce legislation to amend the law that caused a change in what was voted on back in 2004. And so we're asking that they introduce legislation to change the law so that it only applies to local option sales tax referenda held after January 1, 2011, thereby leaving the original 2 exemptions in the 2004 legislation in place in Columbus, Georgia, related to lodging and vehicle sales. And so we're asking that you approve this resolution, that we can send it once again to our local legislative delegation.
Okay. What would be the loss in revenue? I know it was originally, that's the way it was in the legislation, but just so we could anticipate what the impact would be.
The loss in revenue by taking the lodge and vehicle sales out. Do we have that calculated? I don't think we have that calculated, Mayor. We don't have that calculated, but
okay, that's fine. I just wondered. And all right, and Councilor Allen, were you to this issue, or you were holding for the next? Yeah. Okay. Councilor Henderson.
Well, just as a follow-on to what the mayor was asking, I think what's going to be difficult to calculate is what any additional revenue we might receive as a result of coming out on the better end of some competitive bids. To me, this issue was about the public, and I think it's important that we put these things on our CCGTV, because when we tell the legislators, or we request of the legislative delegation things we'd like to see, if the citizens follow up with phone calls or when they contact them and you see them out and about in the community and you add your comments, that goes miles farther than what we're asking them to do. And this particular item is stuck in my craw just because it was changed without our knowledge, and we're the only community in the state of Georgia right now that's impacted by it. And it was proposed, and I'm certainly not alleging anything, but it was proposed by a municipality that we are in regular competition with for conventions and things of that nature. And what this did was added, kind of through the back door, another penny sales tax onto our hotel motel tax. And it doesn't sound like a lot to us if we're going to stay a night or two in a hotel, but somebody booking 40 or 50 rooms, all of a sudden it's a major impact. Puts us at a competitive disadvantage, and beyond that, it changes the rules of a game that we told the citizens about after the game was played. And anyway, your comments are appreciated if you get a chance to mention it to your delegate. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So that is the item of the other local option sales tax, OLOST, exemption for hotel motel tax, putting that on the legislative agenda. Is there any further discussion on this item? Okay. Yeah, we'll need a motion. We got a motion second for approval. One second as I. All right, if you would, and we're going to take these one at a time, so you can record your votes electronically. So they'll pull them up one at a time. All right, thank you.
Number 2 on our list is something that we've had on the list for a number of years, and we've not gotten any action. And this particular item is a concern, not just in Columbus, but a concern statewide. In fact, I was at the Georgia Municipal Association Legislative Policy Committee meeting last week in Macon, and this was discussed as an ongoing concern. And so it's not just here in Columbus, but it's sales tax accountability and transparency, user safeguard. Point of sales data is how we refer to it. And this one, again, is being brought forward by Mayor, City Manager, and the Deputy City Manager for Finance. And so we're requesting that the state take necessary steps to ensure the full collection and timely remittance of all sales and use taxes due to the state and to local governments. We are basically asking that there's legislation that would require the Department of Revenue to collect data showing sales tax collections in cities. Right now, we, on a monthly basis, get an electronic transfer with no data. In other words, we don't know necessarily where the sales taxes came from, what area of the community, the various sources, and so we think that this information would be helpful to cities and counties in their planning and in assisting businesses that are falling short. We can see a problem before it becomes a bigger problem, and we may be able to offer some assistance. We're further saying that they should fully capture all data electronically or manually, share sales tax data for collection within municipal boundaries, support confidentiality and privacy of information shared with cities. We know that some businesses may be concerned with confidentiality and privacy if the state shared that information back to cities and counties, and so we support confidentiality and privacy of information. Support efforts to increase audits to ensure compliance and allow for more timely remittance of sales tax dollars to local government, as I said. We would have some assurance if we were able to get this data that we're getting what's due. When you get an electronic transfer of funds with no information, how do we know some of our sales tax revenue did not go to an adjacent county or some other county across the state? And so we're asking Council to once again join or approve a resolution that we would ask our delegation to move this forward, and we would be joining GMA and other cities and counties across the state in asking for this point of sales data.
Got a motion. Is there a second for approval? Okay. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, we're going to cue this to vote. All right. Please record your votes electronically. Thank you. And it passes. Thank you.
Number 3, we've had this on our agenda for a number of years, and it's the 911 surcharge increase, and it comes again from the city manager and deputy city manager of finance. We're asking our delegation to introduce or support legislation to increase 911 fees from $1.50 to $2.50 for telephone landlines and wireless phones from $1 to $2.50. Basically, the revenue generated by the landlines, wireless and prepaid phones does not currently support the operations of the E911 function. The E911 for the past 4 fiscal years has been subsidized from the general fund and other local option sales tax to the tune of about $2.4 million. And so the E911 fees from landline phones have continued to decline almost 10% over the last 3 years. As you know, many people do not have landlines in this age of cell phones, especially the millennials, and so we're not getting the kind of revenue from landlines that we once received because of this. And so, again, we're asking the council to send a resolution to the delegation asking that the 911 for a 911 surcharge or increase to help us cover these E911 expenses.
All right. Any discussion, or is there a motion, let's say, on this item? Is there a second? All right. Any discussion on it? All right. We'll. Is there any way to cue the particular item so we know? Are you keeping record of which one? Okay. Okay. Great. All right. If you would record your votes electronically. Great. Thank you.
The next one has been discussed for the last several years. It's the thaw to freeze that many have heard about, or they've had the opportunity to come to some of the forums that the mayor has put on. And this particular item is requesting the local delegation introduce local legislation to sunset the Columbus, Georgia homestead assessment freeze and substitute a new homestead exemption tax system effective for all homestead purchases after January 1, 2017. And so I want to be very clear on this request. In this proposal, and it has been made very clear over the last several years, and as there's been a number of forums, and so I do want to make it very clear again that in this proposal to sunset the Columbus, Georgia homestead assessment freeze, homeowners who are currently under the freeze or who purchase homesteads on or before January 1, 2017, shall continue under the current homestead assessment freeze. In simple terms, if you have it, you keep it. In simple terms, if you have the homestead exemption as you've had since the freeze took place, you will keep it going forward. If this goes on the ballot and it passes, if you have it or had it, you keep it. And then for those going forward, January 1, 2017, going forward, would receive the $20,000 homestead exemption beginning in the 2018 tax year. And so if there's local legislation proposed and adopted, the referendum, it would be on the ballot November 2016. It would become effective January 1, 2017, and it would apply to those who purchased homes July 1, 2017 or thereafter, and it would be the new homestead of $20,000 would be effective with the 2018 taxes for those persons. But again, to be very clear, those who have it, if it goes on the ballot and passes, those who have it prior to July 1, 2017 will keep it. Okay. And I can't repeat that enough. If you have it, you keep it. And so again, Madam Mayor and Council, we are asking for your approval.
A motion for approval. Is there a second? There's a second. All right, we have discussion with Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. I, like many of those on council, and I'm sure the mayor, have received multiple calls with questions. And what I would like to do is I was asked to present some questions, so I'd like to ask those to the mayor or the city attorney, try to get some guidance. And there's a lot of anxiety and concern there. And just as the city manager alluded, if you have it, you can keep it. There's some folks that think that once they pass, they can hand that home over to their children, and they get to keep the freeze. But that's not the case. That's not the case in today's environment.
And so I'm going to exactly.
But I think we need to make sure that when we talk through this, we're not confusing the two.
Yes.
And that's my aim here, is to try to get some information out. Let's see.
Do you want those answered? Well, I think you've answered that question.
Yeah, I just want to make sure if anybody disagrees with me, let me know.
No, that's right, Mr. City Attorney. If you pass today under the freeze as it presently exists, you cannot bequeath the freeze to your children today as it exists. Yeah.
Right. And if this passes, obviously there would be no.
You couldn't bequeath the freeze to your children.
Okay. This is a question that is of legal nature, and obviously I'm not an attorney, but I would like to get your input, Mr. City Attorney. If the proposed question is passed in November 2016, are items 2 and 3 on the ballot adopted permanently, or can they be changed by any action of the Georgia legislature or the City Council?
Items 2 and 3. What are items 2 and 3? Do you have them?
I think
the homestead exemption. Yeah, with the amount of the home, I think he's asking if the homestead exemption could be changed by an act of the legislature or council. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought yours was on. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Right. Once the item passes at referendum, then you would have a new tax system created by local legislation of the General Assembly The only way it could be amended would be by another act of the General Assembly, changing that $20,000 figure, if, for example, to make it, I suppose, higher or lower, but that would be the only way that could be done. It could not be done simply by an act here of this body. This would be local legislation, would have to be amended through the General Assembly, just like any other local legislation, recorder's court fees that we looked at earlier, anything of that nature. This will be a tax system put in place by the voters, but it will ratify local legislation passed through the General Assembly.
Okay, so
it will no longer be a constitutional amendment, part of our Georgia Constitution, but it will be our tax system for Muskogee County going forward by way of local legislation.
So future councils could not lower it within their action. They would have to petition to the legislature.
They would have to request a change through the General Assembly.
Okay. And if the General Assembly passes legislation, then it would be changed?
Could be, yes.
Okay. But it would not have to go back to another referendum?
Would not have to.
Okay.
It would or wouldn't have to go to a referendum if the General Assembly changed the local legislation?
It would not have to go to referendum. If there were any substantive change, of course, the General Assembly may want to send it via referendum, but just to increase an exemption, they may not feel that's necessary.
Right.
Okay. The next question has to do with the uniformity law. Again, the two paragraphs in the ballot question, 2 and 3. If the proposed referendum question, does the proposed question in creating two separate homestead exemptions for owners violate the uniformity provision for taxation of similar properties as set forth in Article 7, Section 1, Paragraph 3 of the 1983 Georgia law, which is the uniformity clause?
And in our opinion, no, it would not. And we've, of course, gotten a second opinion from the firm of Troutman Sanders, who defended our original tax freeze from challenge in the Georgia Supreme Court. It would simply be a phase out of one homestead tax freeze over time and a full implementation of a $20,000 homestead exemption over time. And that's the simple answer. There's no Georgia case exactly on point because there's no other county that has this type of homestead assessment freeze, but they did find some case law from Indiana and other places that have approved at the state Supreme Court level a phase out of a tax system and a phase in of another tax system. And arguably, not arguably, realistically, there's going to be some period of time where there's an overlap while the first system is being phased out totally. But they have found that that is constitutional under other state constitution uniformity provisions such as Indiana.
But the Indiana law is not applicable in Georgia.
That's right. It's not binding on the Georgia court, but it's certainly persuasive.
But there is Georgia law that acknowledges and shows that we have multiple varying exemptions in existence now. Like we have a local legislative act right now that the voters approved in 1991 that allows a separate exemption for senior citizens. So senior citizens have an exemption of $21,500 and non-senior citizens have an exemption of $13,500, and that doesn't violate the uniformity clause. And so there is Georgia Supreme Court law that shows like disabled veterans have a $70,000 exemption. That does not violate.
But that's all set in state law, right?
It is.
Except for our local legislation of the senior citizen is not state law. That's a local legislative act, just like this would be. So
that's right. That is local legislation.
Yeah.
That was passed in 91.
Yeah.
Okay, this question goes to the severability non-severability issue. If the referendum is voted and passed November 16, then is challenged in court, will the local constitutional amendment become law as it existed before? If it's challenged and overturned, will the local law become back in effect?
Yes, we've got a specific provision in the draft legislation that would state that the entire legislative act, all the parts of it, are non-severable, and if one section is struck down, then the entire act falls, and the 1982 current homestead assessment freeze would remain in full force and effect. We've specifically got a provision in the Act, Section 8, that addresses that. That is the legislative intent. So if any part fails, it all fails, and we've certainly gotten an opinion from Troutman Sanders on that issue as well.
Okay. Clifton, could you, well, let me back up. In the public discussion and the presentations, the debates, the public meetings that the mayor's held, a lot of things were presented, and we all know people hear things in a different way. So would you clarify how, I think the city manager covered a little bit, but would you clarify how someone receives the $20,000 homestead exemption? Under what scenario would that play out?
Well, if anybody purchases a homestead after January 1, 2017, they would fall into the new system and be eligible for the $20,000 higher homestead exemption. They would have to go down and fill out the same application with the tax assessor's or the tax commissioner's office that you fill out today. They would have to show that they own the home and actually occupied it on January 1 of any given tax year to be eligible, and then the board would look at it for approval. And unless there's some strange provisions of a will or a trust that needs further review, they would let people know usually within a month or so whether it's been granted.
Well, the question that came to me was someone called and they said they heard the mayor say if this passes, everyone gets $20,000 homestead exemption. And like I said earlier, everybody hears a piece or they try to dissect exactly what was said, and I just wanted to clarify that it only applies to those homes purchased after January 1, 17.
Correct.
Then you have to go apply for homestead.
Right. Anybody under the current homestead freeze or current frozen homestead assessment stays under the current freeze system with the $13,500 exemption as long as they maintain that homestead. But for any new homestead purchases after January 1, 2017, those buyers would be eligible for the new $20,000 exemption. They would have to apply. If they're eligible and meet all the criteria, they would get it starting in the 2018 tax year.
Thank you. Mayor, my next question goes to the deficit that we're going to, if this passes, we would be into I think it's projected 4 years. I guess it could be 5, it could be 6, it could be 3, but going forward, what have we determined? There's going to be a deficit for the city budget. Have we determined where those cuts will come from, or who will go without, or what city services we may have to
And
cut?
actually, it's not certain that there'll be a deficit. It was a worst-case scenario assumption that I asked to be run based on recessionary years. So if the recessionary years continue to the magnitude that we had them previously, and home sales continue to be stagnant as they had been previously during the recessionary years, then over a 4-year period, cumulatively, we could lose as much as $440,000. So basically, on average, $110,000 a year, each year for 4 years. But it is of course, possible, and this was assumption that I asked them specifically not to make, as we've seen in other communities that do get a more advantageous tax system that allows you to take advantage of your growth, it does have a stimulus effect. And so if that were to occur, or if the recessionary trends were to reverse, then there may not be a deficit at all. It could correct itself immediately or in the very short term. So I think you're looking at a maximum negative impact of $440,000 over 4 years. And that would, you're absolutely right, if that were to occur, have to be adjusted for. And it would be, the largest impact would be in the first year, and then it would correct itself because the system would begin working at that point. So it would be, basically it's an investment. This is what I've told people in the forums. It would be an investment in getting a tax system which allows us to take advantage of our growth. So, yeah.
But to answer my question, we've not identified.
Not identified. No, it would have to be taken into consideration as a projection for the budget year.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just like if the hotel OLOST exemption passed, we're going to have to, juggle some things. All right. Let's see here. Who do we have next? We've got Councilor Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. I've given this proposal a lot of thought and investigation over the last several months. I've heard, as I'm sure my fellow councilors have, from those who are adamantly supporting a ballot referendum to thaw the freeze, as the soundbite says, from those who are adamantly opposed to a vote on lifting the freeze in any way, and from those who have questions about how the mayor's proposal would work and may be reserving their support or opposition until their questions have been answered. I, too, have questions and concerns about how the mayor's proposal will ultimately work. I have attended at least 3 presentations by the mayor in which she outlined the proposal. I attended the debate between the mayor and former Representative Seth Hart. I have read legal opinions from lawyers who believe the mayor's proposal is flawed legally, and opinions from lawyers who refute those claims. Both sets of lawyers are well versed in law and in the workings of the Georgia Constitution and statutes, and disagree with the other set of lawyers. I asked the city attorney to present a list of my questions and concerns to the Georgia Attorney General. I was told by the city attorney that he does not believe the Attorney General would answer those questions because the Attorney General typically responds only to inquiries from state agencies. I have read opinions by 2 legislative analysts who take issue with some of the provisions of the mayor's proposal. I have heard but have not seen nor read that there is an opinion by another legislative analyst that says the mayor's proposal is lawful and is not flawed constitutionally. The council is being asked to request from our legislative delegation to do more than allow voters to express their opinion on the continuation of the property tax freeze. We are being asked to request that the proposal crafted by the mayor be allowed to appear on the ballot and, if approved, be put into full force and effect to determine the amount and manner of collection of property taxes for our county. That specific request is what concerns me at this time. I may be accused of splitting hairs, but I do not have the confidence that the mayor's proposal will stand the legal test if challenged in a court of law. I know that you never know how a court will rule unless and until a case is brought. I have been told on more than one occasion and by more than one potential litigant that such a case will be brought if the question is passed by the voters. I know that if I express my concerns, there are those who will attempt to allay my concerns. I've read and heard their responses to others who have similar concerns to no avail. One of the fallouts of this issue's introduction has been conversation about our tax structure and how we should proceed from today. I think one suggestion that I heard that has a lot of merit was the one that said no matter how this vote turns out, perhaps we should have a built-in mechanism to review the property tax freeze every 10 years or so, no matter what. That, I think, would be a good idea. As an at-large council representative with constituents across the entire county, I have an obligation to weigh and consider the opinions of all of those diverse groups as I cast my vote today. Please do not interpret my vote to mean that I approve or disapprove of the mayor's proposal. I anticipate that in the coming months, if the legislative delegation succeeds in getting the question placed on the ballot, there will be more forums and debates about the merits of the proposal. I recognize that there is a fine line that we as elected officials must walk in our participation in those debates so that we do not use city time or city resources to promote one side over another. I believe there are several councilors, myself included, who would be available to discuss at such forums the concerns that have been raised about this proposal. I do not mean that these councilors will debate the mayor, but rather would be willing to discuss and talk about concerns. Again, please do not ascribe motives or endorsement of one side over the other as I cast my vote. I've been asked by the Columbus Ledger on at least 2 occasions how I'm going to vote, so listen up. Because there are too many gray areas in the mayor's proposal for my comfort, I cannot cast my vote to approve this item be placed on the city's legislative agenda. Thank you.
All right. We have Councilor Woodson.
Thank you, Mayor. I had one question in reference to it. Let's say that someone who has the property freeze today, if they decide to go, if it's approved, the new legislation for the freeze, can they change?
To the what now?
Can they change? If they're on, like, for example, if I'm on the property freeze now, and I like the concept that I can get an additional, I can get 20,000. Can I change from that property freeze to the other one?
No, you'd have to transfer a property. So you'd have to sell your home and buy another home in order to get in. You would be in the free system locked, and you would stay exactly there. Nobody else could get in it, and the only way you could leave would be if you transferred.
By buying a new home?
Yeah, buy a new home.
Okay, someone asked me the question and I couldn't answer it. So.
Okay. Councilor Huff.
Good morning. I, too, have heard the discussions, and I've received many phone calls around the county. And as you've heard, without me reiterating everything that you've heard from Councilor Allen and Councilor Thomas, some of the questions that have come up, the gray areas are more than anyone has discussed lately. The discussion of homestead exemptions of $20,000 and $13,000 are definitely 2 different systems. And with all of the legal jargon going back and forth, it's still 2 systems. And I don't see how we can have 2 systems legally within one county. It has been mentioned that we have exceptions for seniors and veterans and disabled veterans. That does not create a separate system. Those are exceptions to one system. You can, at any day, you can eliminate those exceptions and still go on with that system. So that's all under one system. And if challenged in court, one of the biggest questions was, if challenged in court and the judge looks back to say, the last vote that Muskogee County took was to lift the freeze, then it would appear to the judge that that's what Muskogee County wanted. So that the existing law would be thrown out and the new law would be part of what we would be under. And that after that point, The issue is how much can it increase during good times, and if the taxpayer, property owner, will have the favor in bad times of your property taxes decreasing, and if so, how far? We can't run the county if it goes past a certain point. We've had discussions this morning about TADS, and TADS will create a system whereby we will only be able to collect the property taxes that we have in the past. All future property taxes above that amount will stay in the TAD to pay off bonds and debt over the next 20-plus years. And we will still have to provide public safety, public works, services to the citizens. So due to all the questions and unanswered questions, I should say, I just wanted to say enough to let the citizens know that I've received their calls. We've talked. I've had many, many discussions over the last 2 weeks, and I, too, will be voting no.
All right. Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the council is going to vote to send this to the delegation, and that's fine. That's what we're here to do. I wanted to say, too, that I've talked to, as you could tell by the questions, talked to several attorneys trying to get a handle on this legally. The attorneys I've talked to, I do not believe, I feel confident they would not be involved in any litigation. But they were there as a source, as a resource for my questions and for guidance. Yet the vote falls back on us. The term gray area has been used. I use the terms from the citizens of concern, anxiety. Some even use the word fear when they start talking about their home. So for those reasons and some of the ones that have been mentioned earlier, I feel compelled to vote against the proposal. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right, that concludes discussion. Just a couple of quick comments, and I do appreciate the robust debate. Last week, the Chamber of Commerce, I guess now it's been 2 weeks ago, they're having a analysis done of Columbus as we go forward in what they call the Prosperity Initiative. And for those of you who are in some of the debates and forums, you saw the use of the charts that were presented showing that Columbus lags remarkably behind comparable cities in our growth over the last 30 years. Augusta, we're behind Augusta in growth over 30 years markedly. We're behind Rome, we're behind Chattanooga, in a number of cities, whether they're on an interstate or not on an interstate. And that's only explained, that systemic, continual, non-fluctuating suppression of our economic growth can only be explained by some systemic economic function of our community. And of course, that systemic suppression would be readily explained, as studies across the country have shown, by valuation freeze tax systems. They do suppress the growth of the jurisdictions. But 2 weeks ago, shockingly, and Councilor Huff was here to hear the announcement, that same analysis has shown that over the last 30 years, Columbus, Georgia has had net zero job growth. So the millions of dollars we've invested in taxpayers for NCR, for all of these wonderful projects have done nothing more than keep our head just above water. Net zero job growth in 30 years. That is remarkable. So AFLAC hasn't changed the needle. TSIS hasn't changed the needle. Synovus hasn't changed the needle. Net zero job growth in 30 years. And that is, again, readily explained by whether or not we have an economic structure, including tax structure, which allows us to take advantage of our growth, and we don't. And so I commend Councilor Thomas for her recommendation that every 10 years we analyze and review and allow the citizens to speak to our tax structure, which affects their lives and their jobs and their families. And it's been almost 25 years since last we spoke to the issue. For any gray areas, I'm not going to debate the councilors, because I would say confidently that indeed there are, right now we have 2 tax systems in the state of Georgia related to car tags. one's closed, one's not, one's opened, people can get into. That's not unconstitutional. We have the varying exemptions. And I understand the questions, a lot of these questions have been vetted out, I think, convincingly at the forums and debates. But my point there is I have faith in the rigor of voter scrutiny. And if this does not stop any counselor from campaigning against it in their free time, they're certainly free to campaign actively against the proposal and bring up their concerns related to any purported legal challenge, which again we don't think is viable, but nevertheless, and see what the voters think. We have 14 months to debate these issues with the voters, and I would welcome that debate because I do have confidence in this proposal that has been many years in the making. But I have most confidence in the voters' scrutiny and having that validity tested at the ballot box. So I hope you all will consider putting this on the ballot. And we have, I guess, final comment from Councilor Thomas. Oh, no, excuse me, Bruce Huff.
Yes, Mayor. I was there to witness the presentation of net zero job growth over the past 35 years, which was just ringing out in my ears because that's my entire adult life. I returned back home from college in 1980, and here we are today. But with that said, we have been able to run a city over the past 35 years and run a good city we have with a lot of great employees. We've made it through the downturn of the economy based on us having a freeze. A lot of counties struggled, had cuts way deeper than ours, and it helped us to get to where we are now. And it was also brought to my attention that we have a full-time fire department, police, and public safety, where some of the counties that we compete with that don't have a freeze, we have some people moving there, but they also have a volunteer fire department. So there are trade-offs both ways. But I think Columbus has run very well over the years based on the way it's been run. There are changes that need to be made. There are some that have been made. We are progressing and growing at a slow rate, but we're moving ahead. I've had several constituents to talk to me about the fact that it's just time to look at who we want to be. What size city? We just left Nashville. They branded themselves as the Music City. And I'll close by saying I wrote on my report before I left Nashville. In all great cities that are improving at this point in time, inclusion is one of the top words, top buzz phrases you will hear. Inclusion. You have to get all of your citizens involved. You have to take all of the ones that are in favor and all the ones that are against. You have to put them all in the same room and hear them out and put their ideas on paper and vet it out until you get to a good decision for the entire city. And the last part was, the question was asked, when you have a meeting, you usually only have about 15, 20, 30, 40 people. How did Nashville get the city involved to come to meetings? And they said that they took the meetings to the people, wherever the people were, parks and rec, churches, wherever they were, until they got the community involved. So I think we're at that point now where we need to be looking more at inclusion and taking the meetings to the people and getting everyone involved. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That's it for discussion. We'll cue it to vote. If you would, please indicate your votes electronically. Okay. And it does pass. Thank you. All right. Next, Mr. City Manager.
Madam Mayor, the fifth item on our legislative agenda is to the repeal of hotel destination fee imposed by House Bill 106 in the 2015 legislative session. As you know, House Bill 170 dealing with transportation was heavily debated, and in the late in the session, the final days of the session, this $5 hotel fee per night got added into that legislation. And so Councilor Pugh asked that we ask the delegation to repeal Section 3 of House Bill 106, which imposes a $5 per night fee on hotel lodging as part of the transportation funding plan enacted by House Bill 170. This fee unfairly burdens Georgia businesses and visiting families who are already supporting transportation funding through other taxes. For Columbus and other cities near a border, hoteliers in adjacent states have a competitive advantage. The fee was added as part of House Bill 170, and it does give those in bordering states a competitive advantage. And we're asking this council to send a resolution to the delegation asking them to work to repeal that $5 hotel destination fee imposed by House Bill 106.
Okay. So motion and second for approval. Is there any discussion on this item? And we have run out of slides to take electronic votes on one particular item with the multiple subparts, so I'm going to take an oral vote. All those in favor, please state aye. Are there any opposed?
Next, I've got personal transportation vehicles, and this came from Councilor Davis. He's requesting an amendment which governs the ability of local government registration of PTVs, personal transportation vehicles, which are allowed to be used on public streets in specifically designated areas. The amendment would allow inspection and registration on these vehicles annually instead of once every 5 years. The current legislation allows it every 5 years, and Councilor Davis, as well as public safety and others, believe that we ought to be able to inspect these PTVs at least once a year, and it would better protect the safety of citizens and in areas as where PTVs are permitted. So we're asking you to approve a resolution.
Got a motion for approval. Is there a second? All right. Any discussion? Seeing that there's none, all those in favor, please state aye. Is there any opposed?
The next one is from Councilor Davis as well, who's not here today, is legislative vetting period. He's asking the delegation to support proposed statewide legislation to call for a 48-hour vetting period to any substantive amendment to legislation pending on the floor before either house of the legislature before final adoption of the legislation. I think he's concerned that some things get added the last night, the last hour, and there's no kind of